village of Briar's Hollow had always been an isolated place, surrounded by dense woods that seemed to encroach more with every passing year. Few people ever moved in, and even fewer moved out. Life was slow, and time seemed to hang heavy in the air, thick with stories of things better left unspoken. At the center of these stories stood the old Ashford house, a crumbling relic at the edge of town. No one had lived there for years, not since the tragic disappearance of the Ashford family one autumn night over 50 years ago. It was said that the house was cursed, that something dark lingered in its walls, waiting for the foolish or the curious to wander too close. But no one believed in those tales anymore, least of all Clara Wilkes. Clara had grown up in Briar's Hollow, always hearing the warnings and whispered rumors about the Ashford house. Now 25 and tired of small-town superstition, she had returned home after years in the city, determined to prove that there was nothing to be afraid of. The house was just a house, empty and abandoned. And as far as Clara was concerned, it would make the perfect project for her to renovate and sell. She stood on the overgrown path leading up to the house, the cold wind biting at her face as the sun dipped below the horizon. The silhouette of the Ashford house loomed in front of her, its windows dark and its roof sagging under the weight of neglect. The local real estate agent had practically given it to her for a song, too eager to be rid of the burden. Clara had laughed at the time, but now, standing there with the dying light casting long shadows, she felt a flicker of unease. Just a house, she muttered under her breath, trying to shake the feeling. With a deep breath, Clara pushed open the rusty gate and made her way to the front door. The key turned easily in the lock, and the door creaked open with a groan of protest. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. Broken furniture and scattered debris littered the floor, and cobwebs hung like ghostly curtains from the ceiling. Clara clicked on her flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness as she stepped into the foyer. She had come prepared for this, determined to clean up the place and make it livable again. But as she moved deeper into the house, an unsettling silence fell over her, pressing against her ears. It was too quiet, like the house itself was holding its breath. She shrugged it off. It's an old house. Of course it's going to be creepy, she told herself. The first few days went smoothly enough. Clara spent her time cleaning, clearing out the debris, and making small repairs. But the house was stubborn. Every time she thought she had made progress, something seemed to go wrong. Doors she had locked would be open the next morning. Tools would go missing, only to turn up in strange places. And then there were the whispers. At first, she thought it was just the wind. The house was drafty, after all, with broken windows and rotting wood. But the more she listened, the more the whispers seemed intentional. They would rise and fall, too rhythmic to be random, too human to be the wind. Clara told herself it was nothing. She worked harder, longer hours, trying to drown out the noise. But the harder she worked, the louder the whispers became. One night, as she was finishing up some patchwork in the upstairs bedroom, Clara heard it clearly for the first time. A low, raspy voice, just barely a whisper, said her name. Clara. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She stood perfectly still, straining to hear over the sound of her own breathing. Clara. Come home. The voice was soft, almost pleading, but it sent a chill down her spine. She whirled around, her flashlight sweeping over the room. There was nothing there. Just the old, empty house and the sound of her own ragged breathing. This is ridiculous, she muttered, trying to shake off the fear that clung to her like a second skin. You're just tired. That's all. But deep down, Clara knew something was wrong. She couldn't explain it, couldn't put her finger on it, but the house was alive. and it wanted something from her. The next morning, Clara woke to find her bedroom door ajar. She distinctly remembered closing it the night before. She stared at it for a moment, her stomach twisting in knots, before getting out of bed. As she reached for the door, she noticed something new. Written on the wall, in a dark, smeared substance, was a single word: leave. Clara's heart skipped a beat. She stumbled back, her mind racing. Was someone messing with her? Was it a sick joke? She ran her hands over the writing, half expecting it to wipe away like dirt. But it didn't. It was cold, sticky, and very real. Panic surged through her. She grabbed her phone and called the police, but when they arrived, there was nothing to find. The writing had disappeared, the walls as clean as they had been the day before. The officers gave her a concerned look, chalking it up to her nerves, but Clara wasn't so sure. She had seen it. She knew what she had seen. That night, the whispers returned, louder this time, insistent. "Clara, why don't you leave?" She sat up in bed, her body tense. The voice was close, so close it felt like it was coming from just outside the door. Slowly, cautiously, she got out of bed and crept toward the door. She could hear her name being whispered over and over, drawing her closer. When she opened the door, there was nothing there. Just the dark, empty hallway. But the whispers continued. They led her down the stairs, through the dimly lit house, until she found herself standing in front of the basement door. The air was thick with a strange, acrid smell, and the whispers were louder than ever. "Come home, Clara." Her hand trembled as she reached for the door handle. Something deep inside her screamed not to open it, to turn back and leave the house for good. But the whispers wouldn't let her go. She had to know. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow set of stairs leading down into the pitch-black basement. Clara hesitated for only a moment before descending, her flashlight flickering as she went. The air grew colder with every step, and the smell of decay grew stronger. At the bottom of the stairs, the beam of her flashlight fell on something that made her blood run cold. In the corner of the basement, half hidden by shadows, was an old, weathered trunk. And next to it, scrawled on the floor in the same dark, sticky substance as before, were the words, "We never left." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She moved closer, her hand shaking as she reached for the trunk. Something inside her screamed to turn back, to run, but she couldn't. The whispers were all around her now, louder, more insistent. "Come home. Clara. Come home." With trembling hands, she opened the trunk. The smell hit her first: decay, rot, death. Inside, bundled together in old, tattered clothes, were the skeletal remains of the Ashford family. Clara stumbled back, her stomach lurching. The whispers rose to a deafening crescendo, and for the first time, she saw them. The Ashfords, pale, gaunt figures with hollow eyes, stood in the shadows, watching her with an eerie stillness. "You should have left," the voice whispered, no longer soft, no longer pleading. It was cold, angry. Clara turned and ran, her footsteps echoing in the darkness as she fled up the stairs, through the house, and out into the night. She didn't stop until she was far from Briar's Hollow, the Ashford house a distant memory. But even now, years later, in the safety of her new home, Clara still hears them. Late at night, when the wind is still and the world is quiet, the whispers return. "Come home, Clara. Come home."